You're listening to The Hidden Economics of Remarkable Women, a podcast from Foreign Policy. I'm Reena Ninan. I'm excited to share that the idea for today's show came from you, our listeners. Many of you wanted to hear follow-up stories. You suggested talking to past interviewees and seeing what they're doing now. And you're wondering, have the gender equality issues that they were fighting for advanced or gotten worse since we first reported on them? So for the next 2 episodes, we'll catch up with guests and reporters from some of our favorite hero episodes. Personally, I deeply appreciated talking to them. Despite all the present turmoil, they've reminded me how important it is to stay focused and to keep moving forward. Today, we're coming back to Sabrina Habib, CEO and co-founder of Kidogo, a nonprofit focused on creating affordable, high-quality daycare centers. She was on our very first episode back in 2021. At that time, she told me about how she first came up with the idea to start Kidogo on a visit to Kenya.
So it was nearly 10 years ago that I first stumbled across one of these baby care centers. I was working for a large nonprofit in Kenya and had the chance to go out to an informal settlement or a slum just outside of the city. We had heard about this concept of baby cares and wanted to learn a little bit more. We took our shoes off at the door and then opened the door. And the first thing that struck me was the smell. There was no sanitation at all. So the smell of urine, of feces, it was overwhelming. And it was completely dark. I couldn't see anything. I'd come from this bright sunlight outside. And so I began to step forward and I felt my foot hit something. And I looked down and it was a little girl. And I was so horrified that I'd almost tripped on this child that I instinctively leaned forward. I picked her up. And as my eyes became adjusted to the darkness, I saw babies all around me, 15, 20 of them, all awake, but completely silent. And if you've ever been in a room with even two-year-olds who are awake, it's never silent. But these kids had learned not to cry anymore because they were so severely neglected. They didn't receive any attention. Or in some cases, they were actually given alcohol or a low-cost sleeping pill to keep them hushed through the day. And I remember asking so many questions to that childcare operator to ask, what's going on here? And I learned that this was the best childcare option for working moms living in the informal settlements.
This experience profoundly moved Sabrina and set her off on a new path. She launched Kidogo with a bold mission to completely reinvent childcare in Kenya. It's worth mentioning that the Gates Foundation supports both Kidogo and this podcast, and that's how we first found out about Sabrina's work. So Sabrina, so much has happened since we last spoke in 2021 spring. Tell me a little bit about what Kidogo has been up to and how have you guys grown?
A lot has changed over the last few years. We've been growing. I think we've quadrupled in size since we spoke. We now have a network of nearly 2,000 daycares that are directly reaching, in this moment, more than 50,000 children, which means 50,000 kids are able to get a loving, safe environment while their parents go to work. And that means that 50,000 moms are able to work with peace of mind, knowing that their kids are safe.
That is just such a gift. I'm just curious, how did Kidogo grow so quickly? Was it largely fundraising? How was the business exactly successful? Do you think it was a mix of the two?
I think we've just been learning a lot about how to serve children and parents and care workers more efficiently. We've been building our team. There's been a lot of momentum in the childcare space, especially post-COVID, that we've gotten a lot of new partners along the way. So it's been a really great time of having built this for 10 years, being in the right moment when there's momentum and then seizing that opportunity to just grow exponentially.
You know, when you started this, you weren't a mom. And shortly after our last interview, you had a baby. I'm just curious how motherhood has shaped the way you look at your business.
I was just about ready to pop, I think, when we spoke. And I now have a 3.5-year-old daughter. Her name is Amal. And I have learned so much about parenting. And just, I think there was a moment when she turned 3 where my husband and I looked at each other and realized that 80% of her brain development was done. And we were wondering, like, did we do okay? But I think I have a deep admiration and respect for childcare workers. I just think that the work that they do is hard work, and they're undercompensated, underrecognized, underappreciated. And yet so much of our economic activity is dependent on childcare workers and would grind to a halt if they didn't exist. And I think any parent would empathize with this idea of, Sunday nights we're just looking forward to sending our children back to school because we realize how difficult it was. And I just have so much appreciation for childcare workers and everything that they do. And it's given me an additional commitment to just make this work and do it bigger and better.
I think parents don't talk about it enough, especially those early years are so hard and there's not enough warning. Maybe there's reason why there isn't warning to other parents. You kind of have to go through it, but being able to focus and know that your child is safe is something incredible. It's a great feeling. I know Kidogo has actually been involved in changing policy in Kenya. Tell me a little bit about the policies in Kenya that you are most excited about and feel you've been most successful with. And tell me a little bit about the ones that you feel were challenging.
Kidogo as an organization can't solve everything. And yet the problem is too big for us to play small. And so we need to work with government in order to reach the millions of children who need childcare but don't have access to it. I think when you look at a functional childcare system, there's so many aspects to it. There's the facility itself, and is it safe and good enough for kids? There's the care worker. Is she trained? Does she know what to do? There's the curriculum that happens inside. What are kids actually doing for 10 to 12 hours a day? There's the nutrition and the hygiene. Are kids being fed? There's so many different components, and none of this exists in Kenya. Like many other countries in the world, it is a completely fragmented system. And in many cases, these critical pieces don't even exist. And so what Kidogo has been doing is to work with the government, informed by this incredibly vast network of childcare operators that we have, to provide real-time data to inform the policies that are needed. And we're excited about that because it means that the impact of Kidogo can go well beyond just our direct network and really impact the entire country.
One of the things we discussed last time, I remember, was about the licensing fees, that it was a bit of a barrier. How did you overcome that?
Still very much a work in progress. So in Kenya, there's no way to register as a childcare center. You have to apply for a business license, which is the same structure and the same cost as any large for-profit would have to do. And it's just unattainable for childcare workers in the informal settlements. And so we're working with the Kenyan government to design a boutique, affordable childcare license, which is incredibly important. We need to be able to have centers be licensed. We don't want them operating in the shadows. It's basic quality that is needed to provide this care. And yet the process has to be one that is actually realistic for care workers.
As we reported last season, Kenya is experiencing a debt crisis. How do you move forward and advocate for childcare in a country that's really facing a tough financial environment?
We've taken the approach of focusing on childcare as an economic issue, that by providing quality, affordable childcare, you are unlocking parents' ability, and mothers in particular's ability, to work and contribute to the economy. And all of these unlicensed childcare centers that are operating in the shadows, if you register them, license them, bring them to the forefront, treat them as micro businesses, positioning childcare as not solely just a social justice issue, but really as an economic issue, has created an incredible momentum to move these conversations forward.
Can I tell you, I'm super excited for you because back in May, Melinda French Gates chose 12 people to give away money. Each of them will have $20 million to give away and donate to whatever cause they choose. You're one of them. You were one of the chosen ones. Tell me about the moment when you found out you'll be able to figure out who gets $20 million.
I was at the London Heathrow Airport. I had just flown from Nairobi, and I checked my email. And as a CEO, it's really hard to check your email after 8 hours of being offline because you have no idea what's going to come through. And I saw an email from Melinda French Gates. And we've spoken before, but to get a direct email from her was surprising. And I opened it and read it and saw this invitation to partner with her alongside 11 other incredible individuals. it was one of those moments that you just will never forget. And my daughter jumped in because could sense there was something fun going on, and jumped in, and we tried to communicate to her that Auntie Melinda, who she now calls Auntie Melinda, has asked Mommy to come and partner with her on something really exciting. And I think what's so exciting is that I've always been on this side of the table. I've always been asking for money. And it's hard. There's this power imbalance. There are these unwritten rules of how money flows and how the system works. And I'm so excited to use this opportunity and the freedom and flexibility that Melinda has built into it to show how we can do philanthropy differently, how we can deploy funds differently while embracing more risk.
So how does Sabrina Habib plan to give away $20 million? More on that after the break. Welcome back to The Hidden Economics of Remarkable Women, a production of Foreign Policy. I'm Reena Ninan. We'll jump right back into my chat with Sabrina Habib, CEO and co-founder of Kidogo. I'm really excited for you, but isn't that something about how Melinda sort of flipped the switch on that? You know, putting you in a different place of power and understanding to be able to see the other side of it. You've actually spent half a year developing your giving plan. I'm curious, what was that like? And what is your giving plan?
It's still very much a work in progress, but it started with, what is it that I really want out of this? And how can we use this opportunity? It's $20 million, which is a lot of money, but also small in the grand scheme of things. And so how can I use this pot of money to set an example and be catalytic in showing how philanthropy could be done differently? And it started with naming our fund. We all had the opportunity to name our fund. And after a lot of pause, I decided to name it after my grandmother. So it's called the Zara Fund. My grandmother's name was Zara. And this fund is all focused on women's power. That was Melinda's instructions to all of us, is use it however you want, but it's focused on women's power. And when I think about power, I think there's so many different dimensions to it, but I think of my grandmother, who is this tiny little woman who was very soft-spoken, but held her own and defied gender norms back in Zanzibar in East Africa, where she was born, and then grew up in Mombasa. She was one of the only girls who was educated in her community. She wanted to learn. She had this zest for learning. She took on these leadership positions when she was married and moved to Tanzania in predominantly male roles. And she did an incredible job in her own way. And the day that this announcement was made by Melinda would have been my grandmother's 97th birthday. She passed away in my arms a couple of months before, and I just thought that this was a sign. And so what I've been doing over the last little while is reflecting on my grandma's life and who she was. What were the things that enabled her to be who she was? You know, her ability to speak English, which was not done in East Africa, in the communities that she operated in. Having an enabling environment with a father that was okay with her wanting to go to school, all of these different systems. And what are things that I can learn from that I could incorporate into my giving strategy?
Overall, do you think it's changed how you look and approach fundraising by being in a different place?
It's a good question. I think I'm more attuned to the power dynamics now, having been granted this opportunity and just observing now, you know, where something seems absolutely perfect and then funding falls through and you realize that there were these unwritten rules that you just didn't know about, and realizing, interesting, that doesn't work. Or, you know, spending months and months and months of time where the process could have been cut shorter. And this was time that a team could have used to actually do the work. And so I think I'm just really attuned to all of these different things. And one thing that I have noted is that there is a need for radical transparency in this space that does not exist. There are these unwritten rules and codes that unless you've been doing this for a long time, and even then, if you are not attuned to that, you just cannot get the money to make your venture soar. And there are incredible ideas out there, especially in communities that don't get the visibility. And I'm excited to direct my funding to causes, to places that have been left off the radar because of structural and systematic barriers.
You mentioned the need for transparency. If you were to write about this experience, what would you say if this was a book?
I've wrestled with the idea of how to document what I'm learning through this process. And the title of the book would be How to Give Away $20 Million. What an incredible opportunity to do that. And I think chapter 1 would be reflecting on my own journey at Kidogo and what it's been like to fundraise, and those of all of my colleagues around me who are doing incredible work in other sectors and the challenges that they've faced. I think another chapter would be around my grandma and what she stood for and what the hope is here. And I can almost see this through, that in this journey of trying to deploy funding towards women's power, hopefully I will find my own power through this. It's starting with imposter syndrome of how the heck am I on this list with some of these incredible global leaders, to no, I belong on this list. I have something to offer. And I think sometimes all of us just need that reminder of like, no, we've got the power inside of us. We just sometimes need a mirror held against us to be able to see that in ourselves.
For people out there in our audience listening today, what's your advice about starting a social venture?
When I started Kidogo with my husband, we were really naive. And sometimes I think that if we knew everything that we did know now, maybe we wouldn't have started. I think it would have been really overwhelming. So I think someone gave us this advice, which was so beautiful, which is fall in love with the problem, not the solution. We come in thinking we know everything, and you have to park that ego and really be open to understanding what really is going on here and falling in love with the problem over and over again and being willing to just try and test and learn. And if there's anything I've learned over the last 10 years is that this is a marathon. These intractable social issues cannot be solved overnight. They will take years upon years and even beyond our own lifetime. I think it really is just about starting and keeping in mind that end goal. Right now, you've got kids that are in really awful situations in their first few years of life. And so they enter school delayed, and they'll never catch up, and they'll never do well in their further schooling journey, and they'll continue this intergenerational cycle of poverty. And yet we can come in with something in these first few years of their life, a safe environment where they're free to learn and explore, good food, a caregiver that's there to nurture all of their capacities. They then enter school and they're already ahead of the game. And their families who've had access to reliable childcare can work, can get better work, more stable work, earn more money, get better food on their tables. So perhaps rather than 1 meal a day, they're eating 3 meals a day, perhaps even uplift their own living standards. This family is on a different trajectory. And when that kid grows up and becomes a parent themselves, having had better schooling, better life and job opportunities, their kids are at a different starting point. And then that kid can do the same thing. And then their kid is at a different starting point. And when you do this over and over and over again for millions and millions of kids, you can transform an entire country. And that is the goal. And for anyone that wants to start a social venture, it is remembering what is that end goal? What is that vision? Because the work is hard. But if you can remind yourself of what you're building towards, that is well beyond you. You park the ego, you come in with that humility, that openness to learn. If we can all do that, I think this world would be a much more just and beautiful place.
And moving towards a more just and beautiful place, what's your advice for people who are advocating for gender equality in this current environment?
We are living in such an interesting time when it comes to gender equality and basic human rights. Everything seems up in the air. Things that were just a given seem like they are being questioned again. And I think it is upon all of us, especially those that are more privileged, to be part of the conversation and play our part, especially for those that don't have the platforms. So whether it is within institutions and organizations, whether it is in media, all of us actually have a voice in some way, even on social media. And it's about realizing that the decisions that are made right now could impact generations to come. And we all must play our part to be part of the conversation and steer the conversation in a way that protects human dignity and gender equality.
There's so much here today. It has been awesome to have been part of your journey, to see you now being able to create your own fund and see the process of what that's like. Thank you for being so open and honest about what that transformation has been like. I want to thank you so much, Sabrina, for joining us. And I just want to know, are there any final thoughts you want to leave the audience?
I feel so privileged to be able to do this work. I'm sitting in a place of immense gratitude. I credit so much of what I do to the values that I was given by my family, but also by my community, the Ismaili Muslim community. And in times like this, when it's difficult and when the world feels like it's all upside down, it's about coming back to who you are and what you want to see in this world, and having courage to know that you actually can do something. I could have never imagined 10 years ago that I would be where I am today. And it required just starting, having an idea and just starting. And here we are. And so for anybody out there, if there is something that you are irked about, if there's something happening in the world that doesn't feel right to you, if you think about your kids and your grandkids and you see you want a different life for them, then it's almost about thinking, reflecting, what is your role to play? And then rolling up your sleeves and just starting and seeing what happens. And if we can all do that, we will have done something really beautiful here.
Sabrina Habib with Kidogo, it's been a pleasure to watch your entrepreneurial journey, and now being able to start your own fund. We look forward to following the journey. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Next week on Hero, we continue our look back on the most impactful stories of the past 4 years with our Reporters Roundtable.
I think one of the greatest challenges I encountered was finding a source willing to go on record, especially someone who had experienced sexual harassment.
All that next week. And that does it for today's show. The Hidden Economics of Remarkable Women is hosted by me, Reena Ninan. Laura Rossbrow-Tellem is our senior producer. Rob Sachs, our managing director. And Mika Ellison provided production assistance. The Hidden Economics of Remarkable Women is a production of Foreign Policy and is supported by the Gates Foundation and the Roberta Buffett Institute for Global Affairs at Northwestern University. Thanks for listening. We'll be back in your feed next week.